and welcome to When I Grow Up.
Thanks, Nicolette. I'm happy to be here. I also want to really learn from myself from the topic, so it will be interesting to share and just listen to what we are exchanging as well.
Awesome. It's actually, I was thinking before, it's so funny that, we've worked together for, I think, about 3 years, and now we always spoke about business and personal life, but we never really got into your career story and a little bit of your backstory. So I'm also super excited to learn from you. I think maybe a nice place to start would be to learn a little bit about your background. So before we get into your actual career, if you can say a little bit of something about where did you grow up, what did your parents do, and what were some of the early ideas you had about your career growing up?
I grew up in, I wouldn't say a village, but a rural area in Western Kenya called Mumias. My father used to work for a sugar factory. So I pretty much grew up in a normal family with six other siblings. So we are a total of seven, and I'm the fourth born. My father, by profession, was a clinical officer, and my mother was a primary school teacher. So it was a very normal family within the African context. I don't know what if that would make sense, but going to school every day, coming back to meals prepared by my mother, playing over the weekends with my siblings, going to church on Sundays. Yeah, so that was just normal life for us. And then high school, I went to an area called Eldoret, which is in the Rift Valley region. By then, my father retired and relocated back to the village where he was originally born. So after high school, now I'd go back to the village. It was very calm, relaxed life. I mean, nothing much happens in the village. Yeah, then after that, I went to the University of Nairobi. So now moving to the big city, studied there for 4 years. I did my first degree in anthropology.
I wanted to ask you before you go through your career journey a little bit about how you went from, your upbringing more in the countryside to having that vision around what you wanted to study. I mean, anthropology is also something very specific. To be completely transparent, I had to Google before this call, what is anthropology? So how did you decide that you want to study that, and kind of where did that vision come from to go to the city? Was it always assumed that you would go study? How did that come about?
Interesting question. I didn't choose to study anthropology. So what typically happened during our time and in our context, if you're a bright student, which thankfully I was, then it is expected that you go to a national school and then you go to the University of Nairobi. So you go to the bigger universities. So that is what was expected. I wanted to do medicine because my father was a clinical officer, and he always wanted somebody to, take over in his line of career. And I always knew I was going to be a doctor. So my first choice was medicine, University of Nairobi. Then I picked, I think, dental surgery. And then I think I picked pharmacy as my three first courses, and all at the University of Nairobi. Then when my results came back, I had 78 points, and you could only be cleared for medicine if you had 80. So I was short of 2 points to get into medical school. And so I think then you're just reallocated into any other course. So then I got this letter that I've been called to do anthropology, and none of us knew what anthropology was, not even my dad. But then the good thing was that in our village now, there was a community program that was running that was led by some Danish anthropologists. And some of the professors from the University of Nairobi were in charge of those projects. And one of those professors was a friend to my father. So when my father talked to him and told him, oh, my daughter has been called to the University of Nairobi to study anthropology. I don't know what that is. I think it's, useless course, whatever. He really wanted me to do medicine. He even wanted me to, maybe study abroad and go to the regional countries like Uganda and still do medicine. So then this good professor told him, no, I'm actually in this village because of anthropology, and I can tell you what anthropology is and how that can, change communities, shape the world, shape different ideologies. I think even in my first 2 years at the university, I still didn't get a good grasp of what it was because I was a bit lost, still disappointed that I didn't get to do what I wanted to do. But it's only in my third year, that's when I grew interest in it. Then after my fourth year, then when Kenya Medical Research Institute approached the department at the university to look for interns, the department picked the 6 best students, and I was among the 6 best. So then now doing applied anthropology now in the real world, that's what now, shaped my whole thinking around it and appreciating it.
Did you then started your career in anthropology. Can you take us just through what your journey has been like after studies and kind of how you then ended up working with your current company, Bopinc?
Yeah, great. So when I started working for Kenya Medical Research Institute as a social researcher now, anthropologist, my job really was to, be with communities, speak with communities, understand their way of life, understand what their needs are, because then the role of KEMRI, so I'll say KEMRI, which is the short form of Kenya Medical Research Institute, was to bring interventions, medical interventions back to communities, trying to identify within the communities how they have lived, with different diseases or with different situations. And then if there's an intervention coming in, what would be some of the barriers that would, prevent the intervention from successfully being introduced in the communities, or what would be some of the behaviors around new interventions. So that was my role, talking to people, understanding their way of life, understanding challenges, barriers, and all that. And I worked on three specific projects, one on family planning and one on prevention of mother-to-child transmission of HIV, and the third one was on influenza. So those are very nice, interesting projects. Then 5 years into working with KEMRI, because I was also starting a family, and because my work was, within rural areas, different communities, so there was a lot of movement as well. So I felt it was not stable for me. So my way out was to go back to school and do my master's, and then take like a 2-year break. Because then I got pregnant with my first child. But then in the same time, my sister was also a bit frustrated with her employer. And she felt that, everything she was doing for her employer, she could do for herself. She was working with a marketing agency. So she reached out to me and said, Beryl, you're a researcher, you're a social researcher. I'm a marketer. Why can't we start, our own agency and then drive it with end user insights? So then we started an agency, which was successful for 2 years. And then like any startup, faced challenges. 2 years into it, we started struggling with the government and taxes, getting in more clients. But interesting enough is that at the time that we're running that agency, one of our quote unquote indirect clients is now my current employer. Then when the organization went down, we were absorbed by a friend's organization who was now directly working with Bopinc. I was tasked to lead a department where Bopinc was my direct client. As an anthropologist, it still made sense for me seeing how anthropology can be applied in business. Yeah, so then the conversations with Bopinc then made sense. They were also looking at an office in Kenya. I was happy to take up that role, did it successfully, and then of course then I was tasked to manage the entity. And here we are now 8 years down the line.
That's such a fantastic story. Thanks for sharing that, Beryl. And now I can see how all the different pieces come together, the anthropology and the work that you're doing now on inclusive business in the different communities, but also this like really strong entrepreneurial side. What a find for Bob Inc. to actually have found you to manage the local business. So maybe for people listening, if you can just high level explain what Bob Inc. does.
So Bopinc works to support businesses, bring inclusive designs of products and services back to low-income communities. So at the end of the day, the products and services that different businesses are trying to innovate should benefit low-income communities. So what we do is to support the businesses look at inclusive business models that they can successfully launch these products and services in the market and scale it into the different low-income communities. So that's what we do as Bopinc, and we work in different low-income communities in Africa and Asia. Of course, now I'm tasked to lead the activities in Kenya, which also covers the region of East Africa.
So you've of course have led your own business. You've led a business unit for a different company. Coming into this one being a international organization, what was that experience like as a leader?
So it was many things. One, it was intimidating, and then secondly, there was also a lot of cultural differences. It was intimidating in the sense that I had not had, the experience of directly working with foreign entity completely and leading and being tasked, to make decisions and to be very independent with decision making. What we have from a cultural perspective in Africa, most of our systems, including employment, you are trained to take instructions mostly and not to suggest and lead. So when I came into a situation where everyone was expecting me to give solutions and take charge, there was a mind shift that needed to happen. But it was good because there was a lot of support, and especially from my colleagues, just to have that mindset shift. I remember one time I traveled to the Netherlands, and this is something that back home in Kenya we do. I mean, if I need to talk to you, I'll just walk to your desk and start talking. So I walked to one of my colleagues' desks, and I was like, "Hi." And then he looked at me and smiled and said, do you want to chat? And then I said, yes, I need some help. They said, okay, check my calendar and book an appointment. I was so shocked. I didn't know what to do. I felt conflicted emotionally. So I was a bit frustrated, disappointed. Yeah, so there was a lot of shifts and balancing in the different cultures and understanding how different it is working with Dutch colleagues and how different it is with the context that I was coming from. Even time, I think for us, we allow even up to 10 minutes late coming when you're with your Dutch colleagues. I mean, 1 minute, somebody's already sending you a message. Are we still having this meeting?
I totally get that because when I first moved to the Netherlands, obviously South Africa it's there's a lot of similarities, and of course I also worked in Kenya before I actually worked in the Netherlands. It is a bit of shock to the system, and you're not sure, like, then always how to do it exactly. But what I found really cool as well is that I learned a lot of things in the Netherlands that I think actually helped me in my career, like a lot of things around
Yeah.
work-life balance, a lot of things around sharing my ideas, feeling more free to be creative. Is there anything from the Dutch culture that you feel that you took into your own leadership style that's actually been super beneficial?
Yes, definitely. So time management, nowadays I get so, agitated if somebody comes late for a meeting by 1 minute or 2 minutes. And I learned very fast and adapted, which is good. Independence and, just being responsible for and accounting for your time as well. That people can be independent and trusted, and you do not have to micromanage. Most of the settings and in the previous leadership styles, you sort of feel like you have to be there for people to work with experiencing the Dutch culture, and this has also helped my career and it has also helped me in my leadership style. I mean, just trusting people and giving them full responsibility over what they need to do, that they're responsible for it, and trusting that they can actually deliver on time and, deliver quality has also helped. So you give people freedom to think, to innovate, and to, do their work. So that has been really helpful. I think the work-life balance for me has also been great because that also helps, not just for me, but also translating that back to the team that I lead, so that then you have people working when they're in the right mental state, that they can balance different aspects of their life, and work is just one of that aspect. Yeah, so it's been a lot of learning and definitely leading by, through service. So one of the things that really impressed me, every time you're in a meeting, it is quote unquote the boss that is quick to, serve you a drink, serve you tea. It was so interesting because in our context, you sit and then people are running around you and serving you. So that was also good, so that you just make it that even in the different spaces, as a leader, you're accessible. People can access you, people can reach out to you when they need help, and then people feel free. And when people feel free and they're comfortable, then, they're in a good environment that they can actually work in.
Yeah, that's
Mm.
that's amazing. I think it's exceptional in the Kenyan context. Like, I'm wondering if that shift was really hard for you in the context of being, such a top achiever from a very young age, all through university into that first internship. And then, of course, with that leadership style where there is more a hierarchy and everyone's running around you, there's also a lot of prestige that comes with that. And so I'm wondering if making that shift in your leadership style, that takes a lot of humility and a lot of taking the ego away. That must have been really hard as a leader to reconcile with.
So for me, I mean, the ego part and the hierarchy part was not an issue because my personality also sort of helped me. I'm more of a people's person. And even when, typically in our context, you're the boss, you'll still find me with the people. And maybe that also aligns with being an anthropologist and always wanting to be where where the action is happening. So you'd never find me, locked up in an office somewhere and trying to be alone and, feeling like I'm the boss. So that was not really a problem. What I found a bit hard to reconcile and took time was the part of, I don't want to really call it micromanaging, but trusting that people do not have to come to work 8 to 5 for them to work, for example, that it is okay for people to be wherever they are and that they're actually working. Because one of the things that we believed or were accustomed to is that, you report to work at 8 and then clock out at 5. And then those hours between 8 and 5 is what we count as productive work. I didn't know how to manage it, that I can have someone working from home and I'm in the office and they're actually working. But it is good that, other things, other changes in the world like COVID also reinforce that. I think that is the only part that was a little bit challenging for me in terms of a culture shift.
Yeah, I've also struggled with that one because generally I used to not trust people at all. And I think it's hard because with the micromanagement piece, especially if you are someone that has been an achiever or like be a perfectionist, you can also see how things should happen or how you want them to happen.
Yeah.
And I think part of that trust is that someone else might have a completely different process. They might have a completely different way of getting there, timing, approach, but the outcome might still be great, even if the outcome is maybe completely different to what you would have wanted it to be. And I found that really hard then in the micromanaging piece to actually stand and look at someone else's process and be like, okay, I don't completely understand what you're doing here. It also feels like it's going slow or it's not going how I think it should go. And I learned very hard lessons with that. Then actually at the end of the day, seeing like, oh shit, this project's actually going really well. And I was very little, like involved very little. I was more there to troubleshoot and to guide. And so I think that's been a huge transformation for me, in a leadership capacity, is to not only trust that they can do it, but to trust that whatever process they choose is best for them and that the outcome, even if it might look completely different to mine, that is still okay. And just letting go of that control.
I think what has also helped is that, and I have learned this, when you give people freedom and room to actually, be responsible for their work, they step up. So not everyone, but at least a big number steps up. So if you have a strong team, which thankfully I do have, it also helps. So then the control part of it becomes easier to let go.
Yeah, that's a fantastic reminder, actually, that the more you try and micromanage and have control over it, the less accountability and responsibility people take for their work. And so it almost becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. Yeah, I can't trust this team. I need to micromanage them. And then they don't step up and take that accountability because you are there stepping in 24/7 and actually stepping back and giving them that space is going to show that they can be trusted. And then you can build that over time. So I love that. I want to ask you a little bit about authenticity at work and authenticity as a leader, because you've already alluded a bit to your style being that more like very people focused. And I was just thinking earlier about, what was really standing out for me about you as a leader. And what I wrote down was that you're very humble and that there is a gentle deliberateness to you. Like you are very kind, you have a kind of a calm and a gentle persona, but you are still very deliberate and focused and you connect very, very well with people. And I've seen you obviously in action in some of those like donor meetings or business development meetings. And so I was just wondering if you've got any advice for other people that go into a leadership position, especially in, a male dominated field or market. How do you stay authentic and into your feminine, character and power and not try to be something else?
I think for me, always just staying who Beryl is without trying to be someone else. For example, like you've said, stepping into a male dominated field, I don't want to lead like a man. I don't want to stamp authority. I don't want to bang desks. I don't want to shout at people. Those things, sometimes women, when you step into leadership roles or in the C-suite, sometimes it feels like you need to lead like a man. But I've always felt that that should not be the case. If you lead by nurturing, it actually yields more results. So for me, trying to lead by getting people fear you as a leader, I pretty much reconciled very early in my career that that's not how things should work. Nurturing talents, encouraging people, giving people open space. So still bringing the feminine side of me into leadership and, being a nurturer, I think works.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And I've seen it in action and it's beautiful. So thank you for that reflection.
Thanks for noting down that I'm humble and kind, and I just also mostly give back the energy that I receive, which also works for me. So,
I was thinking specifically of that meeting we had. It was some nutrition project. We were giving the final
ah,
presentation. And that one
yes.
was, the one that really stood out for me, where you actually gave us the space. And so for me, to do some of that presentation and do my thing. And, you didn't seem to feel this need for you to take all the shine. And so, you gave me that space. But then towards the end, when we were talking next steps and also, maybe lining up a next opportunity, that's where I'm saying you came in like super deliberate, but still very kind. And although you gave everyone else space in the meeting, towards the end of that, you really closed it and really deliberate drove forward with action. And so I think that was just exemplary leadership. And that's the example that stood out for me.
Yeah, thanks, Nicolette. And that's what I believe in teamwork as well, and always putting my team at the front because I mean most of my role is to make decisions and to guide the team. So I just feel that even in the presenting of the results, then this strong team that did the implementation should actually take ownership and be proud of what they achieved. So it's team effort and just appreciating that everyone has their strengths. So how can they also showcase their strengths? And that also helps them to grow in their different careers. And I mean, my role is really to facilitate and empower people. And when people shine, it does not dim, your own shine. If you fully understand what your role is as a leader, then you let people in the team just take and run with the mantle.
Yeah, because you know what
Yeah,
your role is and the value that you're bringing. You don't have to steal a little
prove
bit
it.
of someone else's shine to show
Yes,
that you did your job. So I love that.
exactly. Yeah.
I know that we're getting to the end of the conversation. I just wanted to get a little bit of your wisdom on one topic, something that we're seeing quite a lot. And I saw this especially in the Netherlands, not so much when I was still working in South
Mm.
Africa, but in the Netherlands and in Europe. And we read a lot about it in the States and in Australia, where I am right now, is that burnout and generally a discontent with work is really high. I hear about so many people that's on sick leave. And, of course, in my work as a coach, I work with a lot of people that's just really not happy with where they are in their job. And it almost feels like a pandemic or something, that's going through. I don't know if you're seeing the same thing happening in Kenya or you see elements of that. But I was just wondering whether you had any thoughts or reflections to share on what it means to really find fulfillment in your career and to have a relationship with work that's not going to lead you to burning out.
So that's an important question, and I think that's where even having an environment where work-life balance is important, because then you know when to stop and take a break, and especially if you have a team that is also willing, to step in when certain people are experiencing, a lot of pressure with work, so that you avoid burnouts and you don't get into a situation where it's all systems go 24/7, and then one day you wake up and you cannot even move out of bed. So for me, what I do, not just for myself but also for the team that I work with, is every time checking in and just seeing where people are in terms of where's your mental state, how are you feeling physically, are there any signs of fatigue, how are you feeling with work. I actually even encourage my team members to take one day a week just to slow down. Not that they're not working, but you cannot be in the field, 5 days a week, for example. So can you have this one day that you actually just slow things down, check your emails, work from home, whatever it takes. In most African contexts, again, this is where our cultures are very different. And now you can even see in Africa, there's a lot of awareness around, mental health and things like that. But how we have grown up for very many years is that nobody, will come to save you out of your problems. So whatever problems you're going through, please push through, find ways of coping. You have to work, you have to wake up every morning, show up. I mean, even if you cry or even if you crash, nobody's coming to say, you still have bills to pay, you still have. So all those things makes people grow up knowing that resilience or being hardcore is the way of life. So even in the workplace, you find people just, pushing and pushing and pushing, and then there's no point that somebody is taking a break, because if somebody fell sick today, the first question that they'd ask would be, would I still get paid if I went on sick leave, So that already shows you what being vulnerable means. It shows quote unquote weakness. It shows that you're not up to the task, or if you actually really fall ill, then you're on your own. So all those things, trying to, reshape that kind of thinking and supporting people through work that then they have to balance work and they also have to take care of their mental health and all that. So it's very important. In the African context, it still needs to be demystified a lot, because then there's the part of understanding it, but then there's also the practical part of people appreciating that I can actually still be taken care of if anything happened to me. So it's a delicate balance, and it's a lot of it needs a lot of mind shift and behavior change. And that's what I also advocate for, that we need to find ways of getting people out of a culture that they are accustomed to, and appreciating that they can actually slow down when they need to slow down.
Yeah, that's so true. And I think as you're talking, it's just a reminder for me of the privilege of actually being able to work in a company like that. The reality is you don't have social security. You don't always get that paycheck if you go on sick leave and you've got a family to care for, and you don't have this security net behind you. And so I think in that sense, if you start feeling that, you just push and you become more hardcore. And so I think it's a real privilege that when you are in an environment where you can actually, look after your mental health, that we are open about it and we talk about it and we support each other. Thanks so much, Beryl. We're going to end off our conversation on a few rapid fire questions. But before we do that, I just wanted to check in with you whether there was any other thoughts from your side that you wanted to make sure to share with listeners before we wrap up this conversation.
Maybe what I can say, and this is very practical for the environments that we live in, is that sometimes success in life, is not pegged on what you always or what you've always dreamed of that you want to do. I mean, I ended up not being a medical doctor, but here I am, and I'm actually happy because I don't know how being a doctor would have charted the journey for me. So I think if you put in skin in the game in whatever you find yourself, sometimes you just apply yourself wherever you are, and then the stars will align. And if the stars align, then you run with it, and then that works. And especially for young girls in schools, it's not the end of life if you end up not doing what you've always wanted to do.
That's beautiful, Beryl. Yeah, every door opens another door. So just get going and, like you're saying, make the most of it, and that will lead to the next thing and create that own definition of success, like you've done. So if you're ready, I'm just going to ask 5 rapid fire questions.
Okay.
Okay, so the first one is, so if you didn't have to work, what would you be doing with your time?
I'd be in a spa.
You and me both. I love that. All right. Second question. If you had to choose one of your past jobs to do for the rest of your life, which one would you choose?
I'd be a community health volunteer.
Great. All right. The third one. If you could get a do-over for one career decision, which one would it be?
No, now in hindsight, I'd still pick anthropology.
So you would change no decisions.
No.
Fantastic. That's the way to do it. Fourth one. If you could go back in time and give your younger self one piece of career advice, what would you say?
I'd say not to be too fixated in the what is typically termed as, big careers, and to always, stay authentic to yourself, apply yourself in the spaces that you are at. Yeah. And then, like we said, make the most out of it.
The last one, this is to complete the sentence. So the start of the sentence is, when I grow up.
When I grow up, it will sound very cliche, but when I grow up, I want to change the world. I want to change the lives of young girls. I want to change the lives of rural teenage girls, just to make better opportunities for them in terms of health, in terms of education, and in terms of accessing basic needs that, is overlooked by most people.
Awesome. That gave me goosebumps. What a beautiful vision. And you actually so well on your way and having that impact already in the lives of everyone that you work with. So thanks so much, Beryl, for coming on the podcast today. It was awesome to hear a little bit more about your story and to unpack some of these questions around career fulfillment. How do we make sure that we, have an authentic career in which we all feel fulfilled and create our own definition of success. And so it was great to get some of your wisdom, and I really admire you as a leader. So it was just a joy to chat to you today. Thanks so much.
Thank you very much, Nicolette, and thanks for having me.